Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for The Expanse Season 6, Episode 5, Why We Fight. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of The Expanse, so I'll have to start with a spoiler warning for The Expanse up to Season 6, Episode 5. If you have not seen up to this episode, you will not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. So, this episode... I was expecting more to happen in this episode, really, because this is the penultimate episode of the entire show. This is the second to last episode of the entire show. So I was actually surprised that this is mostly just a setup episode, setting up for the finale. It's mostly like dialogue scenes, and I mean, it pushes the plot forward in so much that it sets up for the finale. So it's more of a, a talky, thinky piece or whatever. Just people sitting in rooms talking. And I fucking loved it. I thought this episode was amazing. I think this is one of my favorite episodes of the show. I don't think it's too soon for me to say that. I absolutely loved this episode, and I loved that I thought it was an amazing setup. It was great character pieces. Like the character work in this episode, it just justified the entire show, and I think it really works as a penultimate episode of the entire show. It really felt that way. Anyway, let's go jump into the episode. Let's start with the Laconia stuff, as I always do. So these scenes were a bit dark. Maybe it's the TV I was watching it on, but it was a bit hard for me to follow what was going on. It's too bad I didn't have like a high definition, high tech screen that DOPs use on set. That's a reference to that Game of Thrones DOP asshole who were complaining that people were watching the episode where the Battle of Winterfell wrong. That's why they couldn't see anything. Like they were supposed to be watching on high definition screens to know exactly how to change the settings. Or perhaps, maybe you should actually film it in the way your intended audience can watch it. I'm sorry, I'm still sour about that, but that's another issue. Not so bad here because it's just one scene and not like the most important battle sequence of the entire show. So, and it's somewhat insignificant scene. So I just wish that maybe they adjusted the lighting a bit on this one. But anyway, I could figure out what was going on. That Kara had taken the dead body of her brother out to the same spot where she saw the strange dogs that had brought this bird back to life, in hopes that the dogs would come, and she sat there overnight waiting for them to come, and they never did, so she fell asleep. But when she woke up, and this is the part that was a bit fuzzy, but I could kind of gather through context that when she woke up, her brother's body was gone. And so she hears her parents and other people yelling her name, searching for her. But she wants to hide from them. She doesn't want them to find her because she waiting for the dogs to bring her brother back to life. So she doesn't answer them. And sure enough, she goes in the clearing. She sees the strange dogs. And there's her brother back to life. They had brought him back to life. But he's like, everything, he says like, I feel weird. Like he's not acting like a brain dead zombie going brains, but not everything's normal for him. He's like, I feel really weird. And he seems to be acting like a bit sort of different, a bit low key, like, things are weird. And then he asks, what does it mean to be in the substrate? And that's a good question, Zane. I kind of was wondering the same thing once you mentioned it. What does that mean? So I looked it up. What substrate? And is defined as an underlying substance or layer. The surface of a material or a form which an organism lives, grows, or obtains its nourishment. the substance on which an enzyme acts. So this term seems to be used mostly for plants, but it also, like another example I saw of substrate was a rock is substrate for algae that lives on the rock. And the algae could also be a substrate for animals that live on the algae. So I'm not sure how that what that has to do with the little boy who was brought back to life by strange alien dogs. But it's obvious that where did he hear that word? That's the other question. Like, why did he all of a sudden just randomly say, what does it mean to be in substrate? Obviously, that has something to do with him being brought back to life, because he doesn't even know what the word means. But he heard it somewhere, or maybe understood it somewhere. Something that has to do with the way he was brought back to life. Maybe he's a substrate. Maybe they used a substrate to bring him back to life. I don't know. But I just thought that was really interesting. And then of course Kara just like hugs him and is like, "Oh, you're alive." And it's funny because he looks somewhere in the distance. It's like, "Oh, I've never seen that before." And I was hoping we would see from his perspective of what he's looking at, because I don't think that from our perspective there doesn't appear to be anything there. So perhaps he can see things that we can't now that he's brought back to life. Now that he's not a zombie, but so maybe they'll explore that in next week's episode. What it is he's looking at, and maybe if I turned off the brightness on my screen, maybe I could see something, but I don't think there was anything there. But and so the music tells you that there's something creepy about this. Like there's very like ominous, creepy music. As Kara hugs her brother and is like, "Oh, the dogs fixed you, the dogs saved you." And of course she's a child, so she's looking at it through a child's eyes and not really seeing the implications of this of weird alien dogs bringing a dead boy back to life. And that's what makes this story so interesting to me. But of course it will conclude in next week's final episode. So anyway, let's go ahead and jump to the next storyline. Let's talk about Mars Attacks, the ring space. So the Martian ships, as we've seen in the previous episode, Admiral or Captain, I can't remember her rank. I think she's an Admiral now. She was a Captain when she was in Season 3. But anyway, Admiral Karenino was ordered to take her ships and take over Medina Station for Marco in the ring space, even though Alpha Sorrel wouldn't support her or send any UN ships. And so that's what she does, and she's, shows up, easily destroys the defensive guarding the ring, and goes in and are like, "Okay, surrender now or we'll just kill you all." And they all get killed instead. So these are, and I corrected myself in one of my live discussions, but I hadn't corrected myself in the review I did for episode 3, I believe, where at the end of that episode we see Laconia send something through the ring gate for Marco, a gift, which I incorrectly said was a ship. I was corrected in the chat of one of my live discussions, and I was like, "Oh, this didn't happen in the books," but in fact, actually, they're not. It isn't a ship; it's a railgun, which in fact this did happen in the books. I just didn't remember it very clearly. So Laconia has sent railguns for Marco to arm the ring station, which they put it on all 6 sides of the sphere, so they can cover the entire ring space. And these railguns are like of Martian and protomolecule design, it sounds like, because it says from material that is unfamiliar to us. So these railguns make easy work of these big ass, impossible, like huge Martian ships that have been shown to be like unstoppable, and these railguns just easily destroy them, which changes the game a lot. So Then I want to talk a bit about the strategy here, the strategic situation, which is covered in the next scene where we get with the Martian military leader meeting with Avasarala and Bobby Draper. And so basically what's outlined is, and also we get some touches on this in the scene when Marco talks to Rosenfeld and when Bobby talks to Amos later on, was basically outlined here is Marco has set himself up to prolong this war indefinitely. Like Bobby talks about the war being fought for generations. The way she puts it is that we can't lose. Like there's no way we can lose the war, but there is a way for it to, our grandchildren's grandchildren will still be fighting this damn war, that Marco can just stretch it out forever. Because Marco has set himself with the situation since he controls Medina, and Medina controls vast amounts of resources through the ring gates. He can just sit there and have an infinite amount of food, supplies, shipyards. He can build more ships. To keep the fighting and war going indefinitely, because he has protected the ring space and made it impossible for attack to do any good. And so once he goes there, they won't be able to get to him, and he'll be unstoppable. So that's why the UNN general or admiral, whoever he is, recommended to Avasarala that they take everything they got and try to stop Marco from getting to the ring space, saying that it's still possible. However, it's not likely that they'll win because their resources are spread thin. They don't have a force that they could get together that could be able to guarantee to stop Marco in time before he gets to the ring space. So, but the Admiral wants to try anyway and say we have to throw everything we have at them because we at least have to try to stop him from getting there. But Avasarala is like, well, I don't want to send more people to die, knowing that they don't even have a fucking chance to win, which was pretty significant. But she was, she was talking it over with Bobby. I like the scene with her and Bobby, by the way, where I kind of see both points of view for Avasarala and Bobby Draper, because Avasarala, of course, is starting to doubt herself. Although she's like, "Oh, well, I should have sent ships with the Mars to attack the ring space." But for a fact, she knows they would have been just destroyed as well. That's nothing. They wouldn't have actually succeeded. Those rail guns are impossible. Even if she sent ships with them, they still would have been fucked. So I like how Bobby kind of points that out to her. Is there's no time for self-pity or whatever. We have to just we're on the right side, so we just need to fight back. And, of course, Avasarala tells Bobby to get the F out because she's laying down some hard truth. And I love how Bobby's like, oh, it's not my place to say ma'am at first and being nice, but then eventually just lays out the hard truth for her. It was a good scene. But anyway, back to the strategic situation here. So also we see from Marco's side that basically he's controlling the chessboard, because and he lays it out that he has more ships and more resources. They're just smaller, and Earth and Mars have the bigger ships and the more powerful ships, but there's less of them. So he's in a situation to dictate where their fleet is spread and how thin their fleet is spread, so he can control the chessboard and pretty much, as I said, draw out the war indefinitely while he builds up supplies and resources through the ring gate, which is a very interesting scenario that they laid out here. And so it lays out a situation where Medina is the key. There's basically a small window where they'll be able to stop Marco from doing this, from playing out the strategy of stretching this war out indefinitely, but they need to act immediately, and Medina's station in the ring space is the key. So I'm pretty sure this is what it's setting up the finale to be. So I am just so damn excited about that. Anyway, what else have we got going on in this episode? We have The Marco and Philip stuff. So one thing I want to point out, which I actually didn't catch the first time I watched it, and by the way, I watched this episode twice in a row, like immediately, which I hadn't done for an episode this season yet. It was that good. But anyway, I noticed in my second time I watched this that at the start of the episode where we see Marco and he's watching the news feeds, because Rosenfeld's kind of talking over while he's watching the news feeds, but you can see on the screen that has like banners saying that Iapetus basically rebelled from Marco. It expelled the Free Navy from their station, and it's basically claimed themselves independent and neutral, so not part of the Free Navy and not part of Marco, and expelled Marco's forces from it. And they did this in response to Drummer's speech, and this is of course why Marco's so pissed off at the start of the scene, because it's a bad sign that some of the belt is starting to already rebel from him and repel him because of Drummer. But I love like Rosenfeld tries to sort of console him and be like, well, if she wants to attack an unarmed depot and call herself a hero, who cares? Like, she's looking at it from a different way. But I think Marco's actually being more practical in this sense. Usually Rosenfeld's the practical one, but I think Marco's actually the practical one in this sense, because symbolism matters, which is something brought up later in this episode. And with the symbolism of what Drummer did is more important than the actuality of what she did, and that it could have ripple effects of people no longer following him, which is something Alva Sorella catches on to right away, which is why she's so eager to make an alliance with Drummer. And Marco can see it, which is why he's worried. But I think Rosenfeld is more of taking the position like there's no point in being worried over what we can't control. We should worry about what we can control. And at the moment, that was the Medina station, and the fact that they successfully repelled the Martian force that tried to take it over. And so they're looking forward to doing the strategy that I already laid out of building up resources and keeping the war going long term, and keeping Marco's hold over the ring space, which controls all the colonies in which to get through, which is a pretty strong, important hold. So she's focused on that, and then later we see her show him the footage of Philip's response to Drummer's speech, and how it shows that Philip is actually supports Marco, and Marco, you can see he's like all proud that his son stood up, but he doesn't really, but neither of them get the full context of that's just Philip trying to convince himself. And later we see some of the boring scenes with that Belter guy from the previous episode actually start to pay off in this one, because we find out that he got arrested for trying to contact his brother. So he tried to send the signal out when the ship was on radio silence, and so Philip goes and does it anyway because he has higher clearance, and he finds out that that guy's brother is dead, and the brother admits that he died in the bomb that he himself helped set. So he realized that he killed his brother, and so we see this is a really touching moment. It was a nice scene, and we see Philip hug and console the guy, and I think this, of course, is going to have a major effect on Philip and how he sees this war and how he sees Marco, and maybe starting to reconsider if they are on the right side. So very, very interesting dynamic. On one hand, Marco is like, oh, Philip does understand me, get me. On the other hand, Philip is pushing further away from him, which Marco isn't aware of. So it's going to be absolutely amazing to see how this all plays out. Alright, so moving over to Holden, we get a little scene with him and Naomi. Clarissa. We get a scene with Holden and Clarissa talks about how the hull has been upgraded, the same kind of upgrade that the UN One, so I guess that's like Air Force One, but for the UN. It's the same hull plating that UN1 has, and so it's supposed to make their hull like more impenetrable. And Holden's like, hey, anything that makes the hull better, I'm all for it. But Clarissa brings up the fact that they're kind of using proto-molecule technology, and so since her father always justified all the horrible things he did by saying it's going to improve the human race and make it better every time they use proto-molecule technology for their benefit, she feels like it's proving him right. And I thought that was really interesting. I thought Holden would have more to say about this because he's the one that had to deal with all the BS that her father went up to. And of course, he's the one that took him down and she tried to kill him because of it. So you think it would be a sore subject, but he doesn't. He just changes the subject. So I don't know. I don't think Clarissa's defending her father here. I think she's pointing out that she doesn't like the fact that they're proving him right. Which is interesting. Anyway, we then see a message from Elvie, which don't ask me how. Elvie, as far as I know, is still in Illis, so don't ask me how they were managed to get a message from her through the ring gates if Marco controls the ring gates, but whatever. She apparently, and this is something I forgot to mention in the previous episode review I did, that Holden talked about, that he knew someone who would be able to figure out why the ships were disappearing, and I had assumed then he was talking about Elvie, and apparently he was. So we get this message from Elvie Koye about, and she pretty much has figured out that that is being caused by probably an oversaturation of gate usage. Meaning too many ships using it around the same time as when other ships tend to disappear. So so it proves that using the gates is dangerous, and they would have to do something about it going forward. And so after Naomi and Holden finish listening to the message, Naomi asks Holden about how he mentioned before, and he had said this in the previous episode, that every time he goes through the ring gates, he feels the entities that killed the proto-molecules that had that artifact that has, they call it, on Illis. He feels them, their presence, and it feels like they're getting angrier. So, and he, of course, really feels that this is them being angry, and she asks him if they're trying to get out. And so he doesn't know the answer to that, but he thinks Avasarala should be warned, so he goes to Avasarala to warn her about it. And she does, of course, take the threat seriously. But then Holden recommends that they work with Marco about it and tell Marco, and Avasarala, of course, shoots him down, calls him the most naive person that she knows. Now, here's the thing. In the past, every time a character has shot Holden down, especially in the show, in the books he's a bit more naive, but in the show, whenever another character shoots Holden down and calls him naive, or calls him, naive to the world, or innocent, or stupid, I always disagree with them. I always think, usually Holden actually is doing the right thing, and they should listen to him. However, in this particular case, I 100% agree with Avasarala. He is being incredibly naive to think that they could possibly work with Mark. And I love Avasarala's sarcastic response, where she's like, oh, do you think he's just going to work with us for the better of humanity and just put our differences aside? Like, of course, yeah, Marco is someone that you cannot reason with, you cannot work with, you cannot negotiate with, as Avasarala said in the first episode of the season. So his suggestion is ludicrous. Now, his intentions are, of course, justified, because this could lead to something really, really dangerous, and it is a real danger, something that he's been concerned about ever since season 3, when he learned about the aliens who killed the proto-molecule creators. And so they are something, especially if they are destroying ships every once in a while, and every time you go through the ring gates, you're kind of rolling the dice. That is something to be concerned about, but Avasarala does have a point, that we don't have the luxury to worry about the future, that we need to end this war first. We need to take care of the present first, and then we can worry about shit like this. And I think she's 100% correct, because she points out the the railguns that easily destroyed the Martian fleet, which is a major issue, pointing that out to Holden, and then asks Holden about Drummer. And then it starts to dawn on Holden. It's like, oh, so that's why you saw me so quickly. Which I like, but because basically Avasarala doesn't really care about these alien things. She just wants Drummer so they can win the war. But I think she's smart to do so, to feel that way. Now, I usually don't talk about the X-rays in my reviews, but the one here in this episode I thought was really good. So I'm just going to talk about it now. You can skip ahead if you haven't seen it yet, or you could, better yet, pause my video and go watch it. So the X-ray thing that I'm talking about is if on certain devices, if you watch this episode in Amazon, when you pause the episode, it'll bring up the X-ray to have like a cast list and all this, and also have a button that say bonus scenes. So you click on that, and it has a bonus scene for every episode. Now, the one for this episode was really interesting because it was basically showing Holden looking at the sign that said "Remember the Can't." Which is a callback to, of course, the signs they put all over Ceres when the Canterbury was destroyed and Holden sent out his message that Mars did it. And so as the sign had like a picture of Holden and it says "Remember the Can," and Monica comes up to him and is like, oh, you know, what would that guy say about this? And he's like, I don't know. And then we get a flashback to 10 years earlier, when Holden was first approached by the captain of the Canterbury to join his ship. And it's interesting, they did a good job of making Stephen Strait look a bit younger. It turns out all they had to do is shave his beard off. But it shows him as a totally different person, like really carefree, drinking, not really giving a crap, and when he's offered a job, he's like, no thank you. And then when the captain says, hey, you'll have no responsibility and you get paid and pension and benefits, he's like, all right, sure. Like, it shows you how irresponsible he was and how far Holden has come. And of course, it's also a nice callback to certain actors, because we get the captain of the Canterbury, who of course died in the first episode. We also get the I'm trying to remember who it was. The belter who first pushes the captain out of the way when he has his little cats. Also a callback to his little cats. That was cute. But the belter who pushes them out of the way is the same one who appeared in the pilot episode, who appeared in the season premiere of this episode as well, who had that big speech calling Miller a traitor. And the other belter who comes up and smashes his cat before pushing him out of the way is the same belter who appeared in season 2 that threw Prax's friend out in the airlock. Yeah, I recognize you. So it's interesting getting those callbacks, those little brief cameos. I think it's appropriate to have something like this for the final season. But anyway, so it's just a nice little nod and whatnot. So, let me get back to the episode proper. Let me talk about sticking with the theme of bars. Let's talk about Bobby and Amos, because this is a really interesting. I love this scene. This is a really heartfelt, really interesting scene. It has to say, I've been loving the chemistry between these two characters this season. And here, Amos talks about how he's not sure. He doesn't think he's going back to the Rosinante. You know what? And I believe him. And he actually reveals to Bobby Draper, and I'm surprised. I didn't think she would find out, but he reveals to her that Holden was the one who disarmed the missile. And it's funny that hearing her laugh. Her laugh, of course, had no humor in it. But I don't think, from Bobby's reaction, I don't think she's going to do anything to Holden. I think enough time has passed, and I think she kind of understands about the Naomi's son, but of course she's not happy about it. But I don't think she's going to do anything about it. And then she gives Amos this really great speech about what it's like to, because Amos says that Holden's a good person and there's no room for good people in war. And Draper kind of argues that, saying it doesn't really matter if you're a good person or a bad person. You just need to have someone there the people there that protect your flank, and that's all that matters. And so that sort of drives home to Amos that that Holden and Rosinante is still his family. They're still the ones that matter most to him. And I love the way she just matter-of-factly is like, so back to the ship then? And he's like, yeah, sure. But I'm going to the brothel first. And then he invites Bobby to come with him. And she's like, do you mean with you or with you? And he's like, whatever. That's really interesting. And then the scene cuts because Bobby sits there and it looks to me, silly cat, he knocked over the Rosinante. Anyway, it looks to me like Bobby was actually considering going with him. And in fact, I'm not sure that she didn't because the scene cut. Maybe it looked like she was considering it. So maybe she did go with Amos the brothel. That would be an interesting development in their relationship. I want an answer on this, damn it. I don't want them to leave this ambiguous. Anyway, let's go ahead and talk about the drummer. Of course, this is really her episode here. So, Drummer shows up with a bunch of supplies to feed the people of Ceres. And, of course, the UNN illustrate exactly why Drummer and other Belters don't trust them and don't want to work with them, because they're like, oh yeah, well, we don't care if you're bringing supplies for free. You're going to be boarded. Anyone who with the outstanding warrant is going to be arrested. Walker, he's considered him being arrested if that actually happened, and we're going to make sure there are no free Navy supporters on your ship. And that's a huge asshole move. It kind of reminds me of like season 4 when Drummer and Astrid were running Medina, and the UNN were like being assholes and treating them like shit, and they were like sizing up Medina and like being dickheads to them, and it shows exactly why. That was proving exactly the hostilities between UNN and the Belters that exist, and exactly why Belters don't trust the UNN. But Avasarala cuts in and ignores what the guy was just saying and being like, yeah, whatever. No, your ships are sovereign land. No one's going to touch you. No one's going to board you. You can bring your food. You're free to do it. Whatever. And then Avasarala, of course. We know this is because she really, really wants an alliance with her. But I actually think she's smart to want this alliance. And she's actually smart to cut off that UNN idiot, and she really, that whole policy, their whole attitude towards the belt really needs to change if they are going to move forward. So she would be wise to address that, use standard operating procedures. Anyway, and it's interesting because I love the line where Drummer is talking to Avasarala and says that someone like Marco Inaros was inevitable because of 100 years of the way that the Inners treated the belt. Marco Inaros was inevitable, and if it wasn't him, it would be someone else. And that's pretty powerful. And that is a very powerful, interesting perspective. And I love how Avasarala, she kind of just brushes it off. Oh, that's very interesting. I want to hear more. Can you go meet with me? And Drummer's like, no. I've come here to give the belt food, not to see you, and just hangs up on her. But you can tell that throughout the episode, Avasarala is trying to court her the whole thing with the person Holden, and also like the way the guards treat her differently. And I love that scene when she was trying to get through the checkpoint where all the Belters had to go through all these scannings, and the guard's just like, hey, you're Drummer. Yeah, you don't need to stay in line. You can go. She's like, no, I want to stay in line. But then the other Belter's like, look, don't waste your time with this shit. Just, you got too much important stuff to do. That was a really good scene. I really like that. Then, of course, we also had Drummer having to say goodbye to her family, the last two members of her family, as the replacement arm, which in the previous episode I wasn't sure if he was getting one, but someone pointed out to me that they did show him getting one in the previous episode. However, it's not taking. The replacement arm isn't working, and the doctor has to remove it, and so they can't. Now the tissue's dead, and there's no way to regrow an arm, so he's going to have to get a prosthetic instead. And I assume like this is like a futuristic prosthetic, like a mechanical arm, like an awesome like Winter Soldier type arm. So he's gonna be awesome with it. But yeah. So, but it's he's gonna be in a lot of pain. It's gonna be a long process, and Michio says that she's gonna stay with him on Ceres, and Drummer, of course, is like, "What? You want to stay under the oak of the inners?" And she's like, "Yeah, we're gonna live that way, and I'm gonna help him, and you can go off and do your thing because we're not fighting. We can't help you in this fight anymore." And it was such a touching scene, and and the way that. Drummer, before she left, she's like, "I never loved you because you were fighters. I loved you because you were builders." Yeah, really touching stuff, especially the way that it affects Drummer, which we get more in this next scene with Naomi, which the crown jewel of the episode. So Naomi had recorded a message for Drummer asking to meet, and Drummer listened to it and ignored it, made no response to it. But when she returns to her ship and the airlock, Naomi's there waiting for her, and Drummer's being cordial. She's being a bit standoffish but polite, and invites her in the ship to talk some more. And in fact, when Drummer first sees her, she says Nagata, not Naomi, and so that really underlines how she's keeping Naomi at a distance. And so when Naomi comes in, they're chit-chatting, and Naomi's like, "Oh, can I meet your family?" And Drummer's like, "No, my family's all gone." And just flat out lays it out, almost like laying a guilt trip on Naomi, saying, "No, 2 of them left when I defended the Rosinante, and another one was killed by Marco in reprisal for defending the Rosinante, and the other 2 just left, are staying on Ceres so they don't have to keep paying for my mistakes." I think that's unfair. I think Drummer's being too hard on herself. She's being guilty. She's feeling guilty because that's not why they're staying behind. They're not staying behind because they don't want to keep paying for her mistakes. They're staying behind because they're in no position to help her anymore. That Joseph cannot help her, cannot be in the fight anymore, and he feels bad about it. And Michio recognizes that he can't fight anymore, and that he'll need someone, that he'll need help. And she knows that Drummer needs to keep fighting Marco, and she's okay with that, but she needs to stay and help Joseph. So it's not so much, because we don't want to keep paying for your mistakes. It's more of that she knows that Joseph needs him, and Joseph isn't able to help her anymore. So Drummer's being too hard on herself, but she's playing a little guilt trip on Naomi, even if she won't admit it to herself that that's what she's doing, but that is what she's doing. Naomi calls her out on that. She's like, "Oh, so you think I have it harder, I have it easier than you?" And Drummer's like, No, I didn't say that, but she did. and then Naomi apologizes for what happened to her family, and then Drummer's finally like, "Well, you didn't come here to apologize. Why are you here?" And Amy's just like, "Oh, I came here to see you." And Drummer's like, "Well, no, you know me well enough to know if I don't respond to you, that means I don't want to be seen." So then Naomi comes clean and flat out tells the truth that Holden asked her to speak to her on Avasarala's behalf. And of course, Drummer gets outraged by this, and I love it that her response is, "You should go." She turns around and gets angry, but Naomi doesn't leave, and so she calls everyone to clear the deck, and lays into Naomi how she's not going to be on the inner's leash, and asks Naomi how she can be on their side, and Naomi answers that she's on her own side. And I actually love this because Naomi was actually been feeling guilty and for herself and all the belters she's been killing throughout the season, and it seems in this scene she's come to terms with her role and is actually feels justified enough to justify these to Drummer. And in fact, I believe even saying this to Drummer makes her feel better about what she's doing and more convinced that she is doing the right thing and is on the right side. So Drummer feels like she's in an impossible situation, that her choices are to either wait for Marco to put a bounty up high enough where someone's going to kill her, or to put a collar around her neck and give Earth the leash, which I think is too harsh. That's not actually what the situation is. But Naomi doesn't actually point that out. Naomi just says, well, if you have a better solution, please tell me. I'll do whatever you want. But Drummer, says that she doesn't have another way out. And Naomi says, well, in that case, the only thing that we can do is, strive to save the ones that we love. And I have to tell you, I've seen this scene like 3 times now, and every single time I cry. Each time it has brought me to tears. It is such a powerful scene. Like, the acting, the chemistry between Naomi and Drummer is just so damn good. And I love, like, Drummer's response. It was so powerful when she's just like, fuck you, you self-righteous shit. Fuck you. And then she starts crying, and then Naomi hugs her and she keeps saying fuck you. God damn it, this is like maybe one of the most powerful scenes in the entire show. It was so good. Now, this is something I mentioned before in some of my videos, that I've recently watched the Ty and That Guy podcast between, one of the producers of the show and one of the authors of the novels, Ty Frank, and Wes Chatham, who plays Amos. And in one of these podcasts, Ty Frank pointed out something when they're talking about a season 3 episode. They pointed out something that I didn't even notice, that there was actually a love triangle thingy they were going for between Drummer, Naomi, and Holden. That Drummer is actually in love with Naomi. And I didn't, like, and totally pointed it out, I didn't realize it, but once they did point it out, it's there. It's like, and they pointed out that it's not something the writers or the script writers intended. It's something that was born out of the acting and the chemistry between Cara G and Dominic Tipper, that they just had such great chemistry together that they just, that it was there, and so the writers went with it. And in the future, they would purposely underline that there was this unrecorded love situation between Drummer and Naomi, that Drummer is in love with Naomi, and Naomi, of course, is in a monogamous relationship with Holden, so doesn't return those romantic feelings, but still loves her in a platonic way. And so I think that's really important to bear in mind with this scene, because I think that is the main reason why Drummer is saying fuck you. Because when Naomi says, the only thing left to do is to help and support those you love, Drummer knows that she loves Naomi. She may try to deny it. She may try to be dismissive of her and keep her at arm's length, refer to her by her last name, not return her calls, but she can't help it. She loves Naomi. And so to hear Naomi say that and know that Naomi's right, but it's kind of manipulating her into doing what she doesn't want to do, her response is just fuck you. Fuck you for making me love you. Fuck you for not returning that love to me. Fuck you for manipulating me in the way you know you can. Like, it is such a good scene. It is such a good scene. Anyway, I could just blush about this scene all day, but then we get another awesome scene where Drummer and Avasarala meet, and this it's implied that there was an off-screen call or an invitation where Drummer is like, because earlier Avasarala invited Drummer to come on her ship, but it's implied there's an off-screen invitation where Drummer said, no, I won't go to your ship, but if you want to talk to me, you can come to Ceres and meet me in the docks. And so we see Avasarala show up with, of course, a whole bunch of guards, but Drummer's impressed. Honestly, Drummer didn't think Avasarala would have the guts to show up in such a public and vulnerable position. And I do think Drummer wanted this meeting to be public, because it's important to note, like, the Mandrani, or whatever their name is, the person who was in charge of Ceres before, calling Drummer out for being the Inner's pet. So she's garnishing, even though she's garnishing this reputation amongst the Belters of being gaining support in opposition to Marco, she's also garnishing a different reputation among Belters of being a pet of the Inners, and that's something that she wants to deflect. Correctly so. So if she is going to make an alliance with Avasarala, she wants a very public meeting where she publicly calls out Earth, makes it clear to Avasarala that she's doing this reluctantly, and calling out Avasarala on Earth on their years of oppression in the Belt, and making it clear that she will not be ruled, that Avasarala will not give her or her people orders. And so Avasarala plays it right. Like, I love how when Drummer points out that the Belt is littered with graves of, the all the impression from the Inner's impression for 100 years, Avasarala points out, yes, and Earth is littered with the bodies of people who paid the price for that. And so sort of calling out their similarities. And when Drummer Avasarala brings up that stopping Marco now will save Belter's lives, she's like, "Oh, so you're just doing this to save us?" And Avasarala's like, "No, she's keeping it real. Like, I'm doing this so we can end this war as fast as possible to save as many lives as possible on both sides." And so, so then Drummer flat out says that I won't have you give orders. We won't follow orders from you. And she's like, "I wouldn't expect you to," and reaches her hand out, and then we get the classic, awesome, powerful handshake that symbolizes the alliance. What an amazing way to get me so excited and so pumped up for the finale. This is like one of the best penultimate episodes of any show I've ever seen. I should do that as another countdown, the best penultimate episodes. In fact, the title of the episode, Why We Fight, reminds me of the Lost penultimate episode, which is What They Died For, although that episode pales into comparison to this one, because the ending of Lost was so at best. Where I think the ending of The Expanse, I think, especially knowing what's coming, because I read the books, I think this is going to be one of the best series finales of all time. And those of you who haven't read the books, I noticed a lot of people are worried that it's going to feel rushed or The Expanse doesn't have much time left. But I notice all these concerns are coming from people who haven't read the books. Because I feel like all the people I've seen that anyway who have read the books, we know how book 6 ends, and we know that there's enough time. We know that this can be done justice in one episode, especially since it's a slightly longer episode. It's like 65 minutes. So we're not worried. I'm not worried. And if you are worried, don't be worried. This is definitely going to end the show. It's not going to feel rushed. It's not going to feel open-ended. Like, it is going to give a really satisfying ending to the show. Not all your questions will be answered, because there's still 3 books left. So if you want any resolution to the proto-molecule, or the aliens that killed the proto-molecule, or the Laconians on, the Martians that took over Laconia, you won't get any of those answers. I'll tell you that right now, because those are answered in the final 3 books. But if you want resolutions to the character storyline, Holden, Naomi, Drummer, you want resolution to the war with Marco, resolution to the relations with the UNN and the Belt, all that will be satisfied. I guarantee you will be satisfied with all of that in next week's final episode. And it's not going to feel rushed. I'm calling it right now. I am so confident about that. So if you're worried, let me reassure you, don't be worried. It's going to be all good. And hopefully we will get those final 3 books adapted so we can get the proto-molecule and Laconia answers and stuff like that. But as far as the soul system, the Belt, the Earthers, the Martians, it's going to be a really satisfying ending. Let me assure you. Anyway, and this episode here makes me even more confident in that. So anyway, my rating for Why We Fight out of 10 is a 10, the best. This is, as I said, one of the best episodes of the show, in my opinion. I loved it. This is like every scene was like character development gold. Like, this is like, especially Avasarala. I forgot to mention the part where she brought up to Holden the fact that she was torturing. She called back to the pilot episode where she was torturing the Belter by hanging up on gravity, torture on Earth, and how much she's changed. And she even points it out to Drummer, and she knows that that's a strike against her, that she's garnished this reputation that she earned of hurting Belters, of being someone that the Belters can't trust. But she even points out, like, I've given you lots of reason to hate you, but I've never giving you a reason to think I was a liar. And that is so powerful. And as we know, in season 2, she actually changed and was working to help the Belt, but she was still putting up this facade of being this hard ass who was against Belters in order to trick Aaron, right? So maybe she got even a worse reputation than she deserved. Just saying. But it's really showing how all the characters' character arcs are really going full circle. Like Alice Rose, Holden's, which is pointed out in the X-ray really nicely, like the journey that he's gone through, journey that Naomi and Drummer. I mean, Drummer's character development, her character journey has been fucking amazing, because she started, it kind of reminds me a bit of Damar, making Damar comparisons again, because he started out as a nothing side character, and so did Drummer. She was like Fred Johnson's, security chief sidekick, and all of a sudden now she's like the most important Belter in existence. Like, it's just such a powerful character journey for her, for Amos, for Bobby. I mean, I am so satisfied already, and the finale hasn't even aired yet. So I'm telling you, it's gonna be amazing. Anyway, that is it for my review of Why We Fight from the Expanse. But wait, there's more. I will be, as always, we'll be doing a live discussion this Saturday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We'll be joined by my sister Alyssa, and as always, Darren from D's Reviews, and we're gonna talk about this episode in more detail, so be sure to join us live in the chat or watch us afterwards in the archives. I'll put a link to that below. And I, of course, will definitely be here next week to cover this finale. So looking forward to it. Anyway, be sure to check out my channel for all that, as well as I cover other shows such as All Things Star Trek, covering Prodigy at the moment, and other shows like Star Wars: The Clone Wars. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks so much for watching.